If you're trying to break into project management or transitioning from another role or industry, your resume has to do one specific job, and that's to land you an interview. Now, project management resumes are different from many other roles. They need to be really structured, clear, quantified, and without any extra fluff. So in this video, I'll walk you through the 5 biggest mistakes that people make when writing project management resumes, and more importantly, how to fix them so that you can either level up in your career or pivot and transition into a new role easily. Now let's get into it. Now, before we talk about content, we need to get one thing straight, and that is your CV is not a biography, it's just an entry point. The only real goal you have with your CV is for a recruiter to look at it and say, yes, I want to talk to this person. Recruiters and hiring managers are not sitting down with a coffee reading your CV line by line. Instead, they prioritize, they scan, they make fast decisions, especially in a competitive environment like project management where they get loads and hundreds of CVs. So mistake number 1 is not keeping your CV to one page. To put it simply, your project management resume should be one page only. And that is not because you don't have much experience or your work isn't complex, but actually because your ability to prioritize what matters is being evaluated too. Now, basically, a one-page CV forces clarity. It makes it easier and faster for the recruiters to scan your CV. It makes it easier for the hiring managers to compare different CVs, and it just forces you to communicate your value clearly. And that's basically a project management skill. When I see CVs of project managers that have several pages, the issue is a lack of focus. Everything is kind of treated as equally important, and in that way, nothing really stands out. And remember what we said in the beginning, your CV is just an entry point, so it doesn't really need to be longer than one page, because any kind of detail that the recruiters or the hiring managers want beyond that, they can just get from your LinkedIn profile or ask you in person during an interview. Now, a strong one-page CV does not mean that you're cutting value by any means. Rather, it means that recent and relevant experience takes priority, older or less relevant roles are compressed or just left out altogether, and every bullet really earns its place. If a bullet point in your CV doesn't quickly help someone understand what you delivered, in what context, with what outcome, it probably doesn't belong. This is where I see a lot of people struggle, especially those transitioning into project management or coming from another industry. They feel like they need to explain everything and like they need to justify the experience. You don't. You have a lot of experience. You just need to phrase it in the right way for a project management recruiter and hiring manager to see your value. When I was starting my career, I had this 2-page colorful CV with a profile picture and very generic bullet points. And luckily, one of the recruiters during the process, she actually gave me feedback and she said, listen, this is how people did their CVs maybe 5 to 10 years ago. That's not how we do it anymore. It needs to be more structured and clean with no fluff. And it was brutal, but it was honest and really helpful. By the way, if you want a free one-page resume template that I use for my own project management applications, you can drop a comment down below just saying PM resume template, and I will send you a link with which you can instantly download the template. Also, if you want to, you can have a look at the description where I included an AI prompt that you can use to transform your CV into a more project management focused CV covering all the tips that we talk about today. Mistake number 2 is writing for humans or for systems only. Now, once the format is right, the next mistake is who the CV is actually written for. And people here tend to fall in one of 2 traps. The first trap is writing for systems only. That's basically when you keyword stuff your CV with every tool, methodology, or acronym you can think of, and the CV will technically pass the screening, but once a human opens the CV, they will most likely lose interest. The second trap is writing only for humans. That's when you have a really great story, a nice flow, but it's lacking all of the essential keywords so that it will not pass the initial screening. The reality of the resume screening process in 2026 and going beyond that will involve 2 steps. So most likely, first up is an automated or AI-assisted screening process, followed by a very quick human review. So your CV basically needs to work for both. You need a very clear structure with all the relevant keywords for the AI screening, and you also need to convey the value and what you delivered to a human recruiter quickly. As the career expert and author Hannah Morgan says, your resume has about 6 seconds to get someone to say, I want to know more. If it doesn't, it's gone. Mistake number 3 is describing tasks instead of showing outcomes. Now, this is one of the most common mistakes I see on project management resumes, is when people basically list all of their responsibilities without showing what actually happened. You'll see bullets like responsible for managing project timelines, worked with stakeholders across multiple teams, support the delivery of key initiatives. None of that really tells me anything. I mean, every project manager manages timelines and budgets and stakeholders. What I want to know is what changed because you were there. When I worked as a project manager in banking and consulting and we're trying to hire new members for our teams, that's really what was the biggest difference between two candidates. They could have a similar background, but if one was able to articulate clearly what their role was and what their impact was, it just made us as the team feel like we could see from day one what kind of value that person could add to our team. What really helped me personally for writing strong bullets in my CV is this simple formula. Action plus context plus delivery plus outcome. As an example, instead of saying manage stakeholders and timelines for a system upgrade, you could write led cross-functional delivery of a system upgrade across operations and IT, meeting critical deadlines and reducing manual processing by 30%. It's the same experience, but it's a completely different signal because here, basically, you're saying what is the action you led a cross-functional delivery. What is the context? A system upgrade across operations and IT. What is the delivery? You were meeting critical deadlines, and the impact is that you reduced manual processing by 30%. Mistake number 4 is wasting space on generic soft skills. Now, we talked about we just want to compress everything on one page. We want to have only bullet points that really matter and clearly communicate value. Now, if you put a whole section that basically just lists random or very generic soft skills like stakeholder management, communication, leadership, time management, on a one-page CV, this is some of the lowest value content that you can put in there. It doesn't really tell the recruiter anything because these kind of soft skills, they need to be experienced or they need to come through the bullet points that you have in your business experience. You don't need to list them in a general, extra separate section. Instead of listing these generic soft skills, what I personally do in my CV is adding a separate section that is more so focused on hard skills. So I call it qualifications and tools. And for example, I will include PMI, ACP, and Scrum certified. And I will include tools like Jira, Confluence, MS Project, Excel, SQL, and so on. This way you save space on your CV. You have all the relevant keywords in for the AI screening, and you don't self-rate your soft skills in a separate section, wasting space. Mistake number 5 is sending the same resume to every role. The mistake here is not how many CVs you send out, but it's really about sending the same CV in the same order, the same bullet points in the same order to every role that you apply to. Most recruiters do not read your CV top to bottom, but they will scan for the most relevant information that the role requires. And if that kind of information isn't clearly visible early on, they will lose interest and they will go on to the next CV. And I know you probably heard that advice often, like to tailor each resume to each role that you apply for. And you're thinking to yourself, ain't nobody got time for that. But you don't need to do this for every role that you apply for. I personally only do it for the ones that I'm 100% convinced by and job postings that I really, really want to get. Whereas job postings that don't fully convince me, I will just send a more generic one without tailoring it. And when I do tailor a CV, I set a timer of 30 to 45 minutes. I make the adjustments and I end when the timer ends, just because the time box will make it more efficient and will stop me from wasting too much time on making these tiny little adjustments. Now, here's the 2-step system that I personally use and recommend. The first step is to move those bullet points that are most relevant for each position to the top. It's basically the same content, just in a different order. So if you have a role that is mainly delivery focused, you put the delivery focused bullet points first. If you have a role that is focused mainly on stakeholders, you put the stakeholder bullets first. And if you have a more technical, hard skill focused role, then you will put the tool technical driven bullet points to the top. Step 2 is then to go back to the job description and look for 4 to 5 signal words that they often repeat. For example, words like delivery, cross-functional, stakeholder management, agile, regulatory, transformation. And then you basically take those words and you integrate them naturally into your own bullet points, sprinkle them where they are relevant, because this will be good for the AI screening and it will give you a good recognition from the human reviewer too. Now, I hope this was helpful. And if you're thinking about getting a project management certification to level up your career or to land a job in project management, check out my next video where I rank project management certifications that are actually worth it. And I'll see you there.